I inherited a farm from my uncle and got more than I bargained for. I had always heard whispers about the farm on the outskirts of town. It was a place where darkness clung to the land, and my uncle, whom I had never met, was said to be a recluse. When the letter arrived, informing me that I had inherited his eerie estate, I couldn't resist the pull of curiosity. Little did I know that my journey to claim the farm would plunge me into a nightmare I could never have imagined. As I drove along the winding, overgrown path that led to the farm, a shiver ran down my spine. The dense canopy of ancient trees overhead seemed to whisper secrets, and the air grew thick with a foreboding chill. The sky, once bright, had turned a deep shade of grey, as if the heavens themselves were warning me to turn back. Finally, I reached the clearing where the farm sat, and my heart sank. The house, a looming structure with crumbling walls and broken windows, stood like a forgotten sentinel against the encroaching wilderness. Weeds had claimed the once vibrant fields, and the barn sagged under the weight of time. Taking a hesitant step out of my car, I felt an overwhelming sense of isolation. I had expected solitude, but this was different. This was a desolation that clung to the very air. I knew then that I had ventured into a place where the shadows held secrets, and the land itself harboured a darkness that defied explanation. Summoning all the courage I could muster, I cautiously entered the decaying farmhouse. The interior was a haunting reflection of its exterior, with peeling wallpaper, broken furniture, and an eerie stillness that hung heavy in the air. Dust mites danced in the dim light as I ventured further inside, each creak of the floorboards echoing through the desolation. My uncle's belongings were scattered haphazardly, as if he had fled in haste. A sense of unease gnawed at me, intensified by the strange symbols etched in the walls and the peculiar artifacts that littered the room. It was as if the house itself had absorbed his madness. I couldn't delay any longer. I needed to explore the barn. Its silhouette loomed ominously against the darkening sky. The wooden door groaned in protest as I pushed it open, revealing a cavernous space filled with the stench of decay. Shadows danced in the corners, and the rustling of unseen creatures sent shivers down my spine. I ventured deeper into the barn, and my flashlight illuminated a sight that made my blood run cold. There, in the centre of the hay-strewn floor, a strange, ancient-looking altar, adorned with candles, and an unsettling array of artifacts awaited. I couldn't fathom the purpose of this sinister arrangement. As I hurriedly left the barn, my heart pounding, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The ominous aura of the farm had intensified, and I'd longed for answers that seemed just out of reach. It was then that I noticed a figure standing at the edge of the clearing, shrouded in the gathering darkness. A gnarled old man, dressed in tattered clothes, with a wild look in his eyes. He approached me with a slow, deliberate gait. "You're the new owner, aren't you?" he rasped, his voice like dry leaves rustling in the wind. I nodded, nervously. "Yes, I inherited the farm from my uncle." His eyes bore into mine, and a strange grin twisted his weathered face. You've entered a world you can't comprehend, child. Your uncle, he delved into dark arts, summoned forces he couldn't control. I stammered in surprise. What? What are you talking about? The stranger leaned in close, his breath cold and unsettling. This land is cursed, and your uncle's actions have bound it to something sinister. The veil between this world and the next is thin here, and you've awakened forces that hunger for more than just your inheritance. My heart raced as I struggled to make sense of his words. How could he possibly know all of this? Before I could ask more questions, the stranger disappeared into the night, leaving me alone and trembling with fear. It was clear that this mysterious neighbour held knowledge about the farm's dark history. Knowledge that I needed if I were to survive the horrors that now surrounded me. I tried to shake off the unsettling encounter with the strange neighbour as I returned to the farmhouse. The rational part of my mind argued that he was just a crazy old man, prone to superstitions and wild stories. After all, his appearance alone was enough to make anyone seem unhinged. As I settled into one of the less decrepit chairs, I attempted to convince myself that the eerie symbols, the barn's strange altar, and the ominous atmosphere were merely products of my overactive imagination. Maybe the neighbour was just a local eccentric with too much time on his hands. Yeah, that was it. But deep down, I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling there had been more to this place than met the eye. My uncle's peculiar belongings and the bizarre artefacts scattered throughout the house defied any reasonable explanation. I knew that I had to unravel the mysteries of this farm, even if it meant uncovering the unsettling truth a neighbour had hinted at. With newfound determination, I decided to delve into my uncle's old journals and research notes. Perhaps within those pages, I would find some answers that could dispel the lingering doubts and fears. After all, my uncle had been a man of science, and according to my mother, all of her memories of him included his trusty journal or a bifolio that he carried around religiously, constantly scribbling between the pages. As I sifted through my uncle's journals and research notes, it became increasingly clear that he had once been a respected natural scientist before his descent into madness. The pages were filled with meticulous observations of local flora and fauna, detailed sketches of plants, and diagrams of animal behaviour. His early work had been dedicated to the study of the very land on which I now stood. However, as I flipped through the pages, a disturbing shift became evident. The entries grew less scientific and more erratic. Scribbled notes spoke of strange occurrences on the farm, unexplained phenomenon, sightings of shadowy figures, and accounts of eerie noises in the dead of night. It was as if my uncle had become obsessed with something well beyond the realm of science. One passage, in particular, sent a chill down my spine. It described an experiment involving the farm soil, suggesting that my uncle had believed it was tainted by some otherworldly force. He wrote of rituals and incantations, attempting to harness the very essence of the land itself. I couldn't deny that my uncle had lost his grip on reality But it was equally apparent that his descent into madness was intertwined with the supposed strange happenings on the farm. As I continued to read, I felt a growing sense of unease, realising that I was now following in his footsteps, compelled to uncover the truth hidden beneath the layers of darkness that enveloped this apparently cursed place. With each journal entry I read, the line between my uncle's scientific pursuit and his descent into the unknown grew thinner. As I continued to pore through my uncle's increasingly cryptic journal entries, I stumbled upon a pivotal passage that sent shivers down my spine once again. It was an entry that sought to explain the source of the malevolent power that had consumed his farm. In shaky, ink-stained writing, my uncle described an ancient legend passed down through generations in the area. According to the lore, the land had been the site of a long-forgotten ritual conducted by a mysterious cult centuries ago. The ritual was said to have harnessed a... What was that? Could have sworn I saw something out of the corner of my eye just there. Anyway, the ritual was said to have harnessed a dark and ancient force, binding it to the very soil upon which the farm now stood. My uncle believed that this malevolent force, whatever it may be, had festered and grown over the centuries, feeding off the land and its inhabitants. He wrote of the insidious influence that it had... Did you hear that? Sounded almost like footsteps. Huh. Could have sworn I was alone. Anyway, he wrote of the insidious influence that it had on his mind, driving him to conduct experiments and rituals in a desperate attempt to understand and control it. The chilling revelation struck me like a bolt of lightning. I had inherited a farm built upon cursed land, a place where the remnants of an unholy power seeped into every inch of soil and stone. It explained those eerie symbols, the bizarre altar in the barn, the strange occurrences that plagued the area for generations, and... maybe it explains that too. It sounded like it was coming from the kitchen. Maybe just rats or something. Sure, it's fine. Anyways, my heart started to race as I realised the gravity of the situation I found myself in. I had to find a way to break this curse, to sever the link between the farm and the malevolent force that had plagued my uncle and now threatened to consume me. And there it was again. I think I'm starting to lose my mind a little bit. Surely my uncle's journal just has me on edge, right? But how could I confront a power that had endured for centuries? The answer, it seemed, lay hidden in my uncle's journals, among his desperate and deranged scribblings. Even if they made little sense as time went... That's funny. I could have sworn I heard someone say my name just now. With each revelation, the farm's dark secrets grew more tangled, and my journey into the heart of the horrors became increasingly perilous. As I delved deeper into my uncle's journals, I became increasingly engrossed in his desperate quest for answers. It was as if he had left breadcrumbs of madness and obsession throughout his writings, leading me down the rabbit hole further into the farm's dark history. It is kind of insane if you think about it, but I swear, every day, when I'm sitting here, reading through his journal pages, the shadows do seem to move, don't they? Either way, the only thing to do is unravel this mystery. My uncle was clearly onto something, and I've got to figure it out. The answer must be here somewhere. Somewhere. As if the dreams weren't bad enough. Hours have turned into days as I pored over the pages, deciphering his cryptic notes and sketches. The farm's cursed past began to take shape, and I started to piece together a series of rituals and incantations that he had attempted to break the malevolent force's hold on the land. It was clear that he had grown increasingly desperate, and his actions had only exacerbated the situation. I myself hadn't slept in a while. It gets incredibly difficult. Each night as I lay down to sleep, I swear, I can hear someone calling my name from the barn, but I go to look and there's nothing there. There's no one around, but you've heard that vague humming sound, haven't you? The laughter. The laughter is the worst. I swear I hear it all the time. Yeah, where was I? Right, as I immersed myself in his writings, I began to notice strange movements out of the corner of my eye. Shadows shifting, forms flickering in the periphery of my vision. At first I dismissed them as figments of my overactive imagination, just a byproduct of my uncle's unnerving stories. But the shadows persisted, growing more distinct and menacing. They seemed to slither through the old farmhouse, defying the laws of physics. Fear gnawed at me, so I realised that something was watching me, lurking just beyond my field of vision. I dared not speak of these ominous occurrences to anyone, feeling that I too was succumbing to the madness that had claimed my uncle. I'm not like him. Madness doesn't run in the family. Well, aside from my uncle and my aunt, a cousin or two. There's that story about my brother and his disappearance, but surely he just ran off with that girl he met not too long ago. Anyway, I pressed on, driven by an insatiable need to uncover the secrets that bound the farm to its cursed past. The relentless pursuit of answers had consumed my days and nights within the ominous farmhouse. With dwindling supplies, I realised it was time to venture into town for groceries. The creeping shadows and eerie encounters had definitely taken a toll on my sanity, and the prospect of a brief respite seemed like a lifeline. I gathered a few belongings and stepped out of the farmhouse. The ominous atmosphere clung to me like a shroud. The daylight offered some solace, banishing the haunting darkness that had plagued me inside. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the malevolent force that had tethered itself to the farm was watching, waiting for my return. As I drove down the winding path, the same one that had led me here, I noticed the strange neighbour standing by the road. He locked his eyes onto mine as I approached, and I couldn't avoid making eye contact. I slowed the car and rolled down the window. He hobbled over, his voice croaking. "Leaving the farm, are you? Beware, child, for the land hungers for those who tread upon it." I nodded, trying to appear composed, despite my unease. "I'll be back soon. Just need some supplies." The old man's unsettling grin returned, and he whispered, "The farm knows your secrets, and it will test your resolve. Be cautious." With a sense of foreboding, I continued on my way, leaving the creepy neighbour behind. His words echoed in my mind as I drove into town, a chilling reminder of the malevolent force that awaited my return to the cursed farm. My journey for groceries had been but a brief escape, but I knew the farm's grip on my reality was inescapable, and its dark secrets would continue to haunt me upon my return. The trip to the store was mercifully uneventful, and there it was again. That laughter always seems to be there, doesn't it? The trip to the store was mercifully uneventful, and I returned to the farm with bags of groceries in tow. As I stepped inside the farmhouse, a sense of relief washed over me. The malevolent force that seemed to shadow my every move had retreated for now, allowing me a brief moment of peace. Exhausted from my journey and consumed by an insatiable hunger, I started preparing a meal. My hands moved mechanically as I cooked, the familiar routine providing a fleeting sense of normalcy. But my hunger was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It gnawed at me, an empty pit that seemed impossible to fill. I devoured my meal voraciously, hardly pausing to taste the food. The ravenous hunger was all-consuming, but it left me feeling hollow and empty. Even after I had consumed a substantial portion of my groceries. Even now, I am still so hungry. I've easily eaten, 2 weeks worth of food? And still... Anyway, as I sat there, my mind began to race with unsettling thoughts. Was it the malevolent force that had tainted the land that fueled this insatiable appetite? Or was there something more sinister at play? My uncle's journal had hinted at strange rituals and experiments, and I couldn't shake the feeling that my every action was being observed with unseen eyes. With the last remnants of my meal before me, I pushed away the plate, my appetite still not sated. The shadows in the corner of the room seemed to grow darker, more oppressive, as if the farm itself hungered for something beyond my understanding. I knew then that I was trapped in a nightmare cycle, and the malevolent force that clung to the land was determined to consume not only my body, but my very soul. Despite the growing unease, and the relentless hunger that gnawed at me, gnawed. Hungry. So hungry, always hungry. Never enough, such hunger. Need to feed on something, someone, anything to fill this void. Yeah, right. I knew I couldn't ignore the mysteries of the farm any longer. I had to confront the source of this malevolent force that bound this land to its cursed past. And that meant returning to the barn, to the eerie altar that had haunted my thoughts since I first set foot on the property. With trepidation, I made my way to the barn once more. The shadows seemed to writhe and twist as I approached, as if they sensed my intent. I pushed open the creaking door, revealing the barn's gloomy exterior. The interior swathed in the smallest amount of light. Blood everywhere. Bloody footprints, bloody footsteps. The hay, so much hay. Twisted, turning the soil. The soil, always the soil. Soil, wet, warm, wanting, longing. I'm so hungry all the time. As I examined the altar, I noticed, for the first time, something that I hadn't seen before. But no, I'm getting ahead of myself. Forgive me. It's the hunger. I'm always so hungry. And that barn, that twisted barn, never far from my thoughts. The altar, the symbols, I know what they mean. The altar stood there, just as I had seen it before. Dark and forbidding, adorned with candles and ancient symbols. And it beckoned me closer, drawing me closer, despite the dread that clung to my every step. That was when I had examined the altar. That was when I had noticed what I hadn't before. That was when I found the hidden compartment beneath its surface. And with trembling hands, I carefully pried it open, revealing a collection of old scrolls and journals, each filled with my uncle's favoured writings. The journals contained yet more incantations and rituals, references to dark entities that I couldn't comprehend at the time. My uncle had been desperate, seeking a way to sever the connection between the farm and the malevolent force. He had believed that the answers lay hidden within these scrolls. With a sense of determination, I began to decipher the cryptic writings, hoping to find a solution that would free me from the relentless hunger and the haunting shadows. The shadows that laugh from the corners, never-ending hunger. It hurts, I can't sleep. What is sleep? The scrolls, the answers are in them, I know it. The answers, the symbols, they're all linked. There's something in the soil. Something in the soil, surely it clings to your skin, it gets in your head, and the shadows laugh and dance. And the hunger's the only way to hold it off, the hunger. So I immersed myself in my uncle's cryptic writings. The atmosphere in the barn grew increasingly oppressive. Dark clouds gathered overhead, blotting out the remaining daylight, and a low rumble of thunder had echoed in the distance. It was clear that the storm was rolling in, bringing with it a sense of impending doom. I continued to decipher the incantations. I would figure them out. The answers are here. My fingers tracing the ominous symbols on the scrolls. But just as I was on the verge of a breakthrough, a brilliant flash of lightning illuminated the barn, followed by a deafening crack of thunder. A sudden surge of electrical energy caused the lights to flicker and then die, plunging the barn into total darkness. My heart raced as I found myself in the pitch-black, suffocating void of the barn. Panic threatened to overtake me, but I knew I couldn't afford to lose my focus. Focus, I must focus. The answers are here. I know they're here. Understanding will come. I can do this. Desperate to continue reading, I fumbled for my phone in my pocket, hoping to use its weak flashlight to illuminate the scrolls. But before I could retrieve it, I remembered the candles on the eerie altar. The candles, of course, that's better light than my cell phone. The candles, I light the candles. Light all the candles on the altar. You can see better, the answers are here. In the scrolls, light the candles. You can light the candles. With trembling hands, I reached for one of them and struggled to light it with a match. The small flame flickered to life, casting an eerie, dancing glow around the barn. The dim illumination allowed me to continue deciphering the scrolls, but it also revealed something I hadn't noticed before. The shadows in the barn had grown more menacing, more alive. They seemed to writhe and pulse in response to the candle's flame, as if they were sentient beings with a malevolent intent all their own. The storm outside raged on, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the electricity had been intentionally cut off, trapping me in the barn with the eerie shadows and the haunting secrets and the desperate hunger. With each passing moment, the line between the supernatural and the real blurred further, and I knew that I was on the brink of a revelation that could either save me or plunge me into a nightmare from which there might be no escape. So I continued to decipher the scrolls by the flickering candlelight. The words on the ancient parchment finally revealed the dark secret. The desperate writings spoke of a malevolent entity that had been trapped within the land centuries ago. A being of unspeakable power and hunger. Hungry, so hungry all the time. Must feed that hunger. The entity, he believed, had been bound to the land by a cursed ritual conducted by a cult seeking immortality. The price of their desires was the sacrifice of countless souls, and the entity's insatiable hunger for human spirits that had cursed the farm for generations. My uncle had devised a ritual of his own. Brilliance. Utter brilliance. Genius, in fact. One that might sever the entity's connection to the land. Not only that, but release the souls that it had imprisoned. Not only a respite from the hunger, the all-consuming hunger, but to finally free those that were trapped, forever lost within the soil, within the walls, creeping, whispering, laughing, tainted, lost forever. The ritual required a willing sacrifice. Someone who could bear the burden of the entity's wrath and destroy it from within. As I read on, I realised with growing horror that I was the chosen sacrifice, the unwitting heir to this malevolent legacy. A sense of dread washed over me, and the shadows in the barn seemed to grow more sinister, pressing in around me. The storm outside intensified, rattling the barn with each thunderous clap. I had a choice to make. To follow in my uncle's footsteps and complete the ritual, sacrificing myself to destroy the malevolent entity and free the cursed souls, or to flee the farm, leaving behind the dark secrets and the horrors that had consumed my family for generations. As I weighed the consequences of my decision, I couldn't escape the feeling that the malevolent force, somehow aware of my discovery, was closing in, its hunger for my soul growing more insatiable with each passing moment. The fate of the farm, and my own, hung in the balance, and I knew that whatever choice I made would come at a great cost. As the weight of my consequences and my decision bore down upon me, I struggled to believe that any of it could be real. The idea of a malevolent entity bound to the farm, a cursed ritual, the notion that I had been chosen for some sacrificial role, all felt like the ravings of a madman. I had to escape this nightmarish place. Determined to put an end to this whole surreal ordeal, I made my way to the barn doors, my scepticism feeling my resolve. Not real. None of this is real. It can't be real. Not true. Not real. Fake. No. Imagination. Badness. No. The hunger. The hunger is real. The hunger is never ending. I should have known. We all should have known. Should have warned. Should have told someone. I was going to leave. But as I reached for the handle and tried to push them open, a sinking feeling of dread gripped me. The doors were locked from the outside. Panic set in as I rattled the doors, desperate to escape the barn. The shadows seemed to close in around me. The candles, flickering flame, cast eerie, distorted shapes on the wall. It was as if the malevolent force that had tormented my uncle was now closing in on me, sealing my fate. I knew I had to find another way out, but the barn was a labyrinth of shadows and secrets. The storm outside showed no signs of relenting, but I knew somehow that my time was running out. With trembling hands, I continued to search for an exit, groping through the darkness, hoping against hope that I could break free from the sinister clutches of the farm and its chilling mysteries. As I frantically searched for an escape from the locked barn, the shadows began to coalesce, twisting and shifting in eerie unison. My heart pounded in my chest as they gradually took on a recognisable form. A form that sent a shiver down my spine. Before me, emerging from the darkness, stood the creepy old neighbour that I had met earlier. His eyes bored into mine, piercing with a malevolent intensity. His raspy voice echoed in the air. "You cannot leave, child. You are bound to this place now." Fear gripped me hard and strong as I realised that the shadows had taken on his likeness, as if he were a puppeteer controlling them from the depths of the malevolent force that plagued the barn. It was as though he were an embodiment of the curse itself, a sinister manifestation of the entity my uncle's journals had described. I stumbled backwards, my mind racing with the realisation that there was no escape, no rational explanation that could dismiss the horrors unfolding before me. The barn had become a nightmarish trap, and I was ensnared within its malevolent grasp. With the creepy neighbour's voice echoing in my ears and the shadows closing in, I knew that my decision to dismiss the farm's dark secrets as mere delusions had been a grave mistake. The farm did indeed hold a truth beyond my comprehension, fear that sought to consume me whole. With the rest of the shadows morphing into the likeness of the neighbour, my mind swirled with confusion and terror. This surreal transformation defied all reason, shattering my scepticism and plunging me into a waking nightmare. The shadowy figure of my neighbour beckoned me closer, his grin widening to a malevolent smile. I felt as though I were trapped in a macabre puppet show, a captive audience to a malevolent force beyond my control. In my desperation, I shouted, "Who are you? What do you want?" The shadowy figure's voice was a haunting echo, a cacophony of whispers that reverberated through the barn. "I am the entity bound to this cursed land, the hunger that cannot be sated. You, dear child, are the chosen one, the sacrifice that will at last set me free." Terror coursed through my veins as the truth of my uncle's journals and the sinister legends surrounding the farm became undeniable. I had unwittingly become entangled in a dark ritual, a cycle of sacrifice meant to unleash an ancient evil upon the world. With each passing moment, the entity's shadowy form grew closer, and the candle's flame flickered as if fighting to hold on to its last vestiges of light. My only hope lay in finding a way to thwart the malevolent force that sought to consume me and break free from the farm's sinister grip. As I confronted the horrifying reality that the farm held a malevolent entity of unimaginable power, I knew that my fate and the fate of the cursed souls bound to this place hung in the balance. The farm's secrets had become my inescapable reality, and the darkness that enveloped me was poised to claim my very soul. But the ritual, Uncle's ritual, he figured it out, he knew the answers. He knew it the only way. The hunger, stop the hunger, feed the hunger. You can feed the hunger, it'll all go away, it'll be free. Freedom is possible, the freedom is there. The hunger is always there, but freedom also. My uncle's writings offered a glimmer of hope. The ritual of banishment buried within the cryptic texts. It spoke of the need for a willing sacrifice, a connection to the entity, and an incantation to sever the malevolent force's link to the farm. With trembling hands, I followed the instructions, reciting the incantation and reaching out to touch the altar. The shadows recoiled, hissing and writhing as if in agony. The malevolent entity's form wavered, its hold on the barn weakening. But it was not willing to let go without a fight. The shadows lunged, swirling around me, clawing at my very being. The struggle was intense, and my mind felt as if it would shatter under the force of the entity's resistance. With a final surge of determination, I incited the incantation once more, pouring all of my will into the ritual. The barn shook, as if in protest, and the shadows contorted, spiralling into a vortex of darkness before dissipating into nothingness. Gasping for breath and trembling from the ordeal, I realised that the malevolent force had been banished. The curse that had plagued the farm for generations had been broken. The barn was no longer a chamber of horrors, but a place of eerie stillness. As I caught my breath, I couldn't help but wonder if the entity had truly been defeated or merely contained. But regardless of the answer, I was ready to leave. To go far, far away and never look back. The barn, once a chamber of nightmares, had now become a symbol of my escape, and I was determined to put the horrors I had witnessed behind me. As I walked away from the farm, bags in hand, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. The storm had passed. The sky above was clear, as if the world itself had recognised my escape from the nightmarish grip on the land. But as I reached the outskirts of the property, an invisible force halted my progress. It was as if an unseen wall had materialised, preventing me from taking another step. Panic welled up in me as I realised I couldn't leave, that I was trapped on this cursed land. Trapped forever. Can't leave. Can't get out, can't escape. Can't go past the gate, can't leave. The soil has to remain underground, so hungry all the time. As I turned back towards the farm, the eerie barn standing as a looming sentinel in the distance, I realised the malevolent entity may have been banished, but its hold on me was absolute. I had become the willing sacrifice, forever bound to the land that had claimed my uncle and countless others before him. Tears welled up in my eyes as I understood the true nature of the curse. I was now a prisoner of the farm, a fate worse than any I could have imagined. That malevolent force had exacted its price, and I was condemned to remain within its accursed confines for all eternity. I stood there, my heart heavy with despair. I knew that the farm's secrets, the eerie shadows, and that of the malevolent entity's sinister legacy would be my only companions in this desolate realm. The farm had claimed my freedom, and I was forever bound to its cursed past. A living sacrifice to the force that hungered for souls. If you have found this journal, it can only mean one thing. That you ignored the countless signs I painstakingly cobbled together with what little I could find. You've broken through the ramshackle fencing I spent my last days erecting in an effort to warn people away from the property. It means that the endless hunger has already consumed me. And soon enough, it will consume you too.